as part of this session, we'll try to cover two concepts. One is workflow and other one is methods. Okay. So most of the cases, these are the one-time activities or one-time setups which we do when we try to implement or when we try to do a new customization, uh, or when we are trying to introduce a new functionality, custom process. Okay. So workflow setup is done from the workflow manager, where method is done from the business modeler. So method is two steps. Okay, I'll go through that. So just to summarize, we'll talk about these two in detail. So as I said, it's like we have two set of workflows. One are the predefined workflows and other one is the custom workflows. So predefined workflows are the one which comes by default when you install Demantra. So for each module you have a set of default workflows or predefined workflows. Each has their own functionality or importance. In addition to that, based on the requirement, we can create a new workflows also. Okay. So generally what the workflow does is, it is like executing set of steps in a sequential order, in a batch wise or in a or for a selected data points. And the way you access a workflow manager is a web-based tool. So prior to 12 versions and 7.3 versions, right? So we used to access the workflow manager or workflow window using the URL from the browser. But now this total Demantra application, the way we use changed. So now we have only one generic login that you do from the local application. So once you log into the window, so from the same window you can access the worksheets as well as the workflows. Okay. So when it was on a web-based access, we used to have a lot of Java dependencies to open and define the workflows, to edit the workflows. So if the web browser is not compatible to Java, right? Sorry, with the Demantra workflows, then we used to get a lot of errors. So we never used to able to open the workflow definitions. We never used to open the definition if the browser, Demantra and Java are in not in sync, if they're not compatible. Okay, now in the latest versions that issue is resolved. So if you are able to open the worksheets, then you should be able to open the workflow definitions also. You should be able to edit them. Okay, so it's a set of events which we execute in a sequential order. It could be like there's so many types of steps in the workflow definition. I'll show you the steps when I go to the application. So when we create any workflow, right, or if you see any existing workflows in the workflow manager or workflow management window, it will show a list of workflows. And in addition to that, similar to a series grouping, right, where you group the set of series together, in a similar manner, we can group the workflows also into a group. Like for example, mm, similar kind of workflows into a one group, or workflows which go to a certain functionality into a one group. So we can group the workflows also. So this int gist status is a table where you can monitor the workflow status. And there's one more table, wf underscore process log, and uh, there's one more portal underscore task table. So there you can monitor the workflow status also in addition to that. So there are three tables. In general, we use the WF process log and total underscore task table to monitor the workflow progress. When you launch any workflows, to check the status of the workflow, we use those two tables. So this is just an example it has given, just for an understanding purpose. So this is a seeded workflow approval process. So whenever user approves any, modifies any workflow forecast in the system, so Demantra comes up with a seeded functionality for approval process. So here it is giving, showing a different set of steps. Like for example, the first step, right? It's a procedure step, and the second one is a Linux step, which executes Linux script, and again next is a procedure step, then approval methodology and notification. So you can add a number of steps in the workflow, but it should be a sequential order, and you have to mention the start point of the workflow. So this is a high level picture of the workflow. When you edit any workflow, this is how the window comes up. So on top you can see the workflow name, top left corner, workflow name, and the live checkbox is nothing but whether you want to make the keep the workflow active or not. You can use that option. Okay, and these are steps in a sequential order, which are connected with the arrow mark, and whichever step you has a star icon, right? So that represents the starting point of the workflow. So it triggers in a sequential order. And you have save and validate option. So whenever you create any workflow, you can validate the definition whether the workflow is valid or not. So in a newer versions, in 12 after 12 versions, so there's one more functionality introduced to the workflow management. You can copy the workflows also. In older versions, if you want to replicate or if you want to duplicate the existing workflow, so what we used to do is we used to take the screenshot of all those steps and recreate the entire workflow from the scratch. Okay, but in latest versions, there's an option called I think save as option. So save as option, you can use the you can duplicate the existing workflow. No need to recreate from the scratch. Okay, I'll show you these screenshots in the workflow. So these are one more window in the workflow definition. When we include any step in the workflow, so it gives like when to notify the user, when to time out the workflow if it's not completing on time. So different set of action items you can give in the workflow step. I'll ignore this. I'll show in the application all this stuff. We'll go to the methods later. Let's go to the workflows first. So if you want to check only the DM specific workflows, maybe you can go here and you can check the demand management. Okay. So these all talks about the workflow specific to the demand management. Okay. That's how we can get the workflow specific to a different module, or you can create a own group also. Like if you want to keep a bunch of workflows into a separate group based on the requirement, based on the activities, you can do that by using a new option here. Okay, so when I click on the new option, generally it will ask you for the group name. Okay, and you can select the workflows whichever you want. Just for timing and select one or two here, just click OK. Okay, so this training group was only these two workflows. Okay, this is how you can create the workflow groups. Okay. And if you want to create any new workflows, right? So on top, sorry, on bottom right corner, there's something called new schema, right? So schema is nothing but a workflow here. So when you click on a new schema, it will allow you to create a new workflow. So if I click over here, so it comes up with the window with the edit option where you can add new steps to the workflow.
One question.
Yes.
If we create a group, is it public or private? Like my user will only be able to see that group, or all users will be able to see that group?
All users will able to see that workflow group.
Oh, okay. There's no way that we can do for just our user, so that when I log in, then only I can see it.
Maybe I have to check that 1 minute. Just-
Okay.
yeah, there's a private and public option here.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, you
Okay.
can do that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So let me try to open a new workflow here. So this is how the edit window looks like. So here you can give the workflow name here. For example, training. So then this is live checkbox. So if you make it enable, then it's active. You can use for the trigger. Then as I said, right, so there are three options here. So earlier the save as was not there. It's recently introduced in 12 versions. So save is to save the definition of the workflow, and validate is once you add all the steps in the workflow, just to check the way the workflow is valid or not, you can use this validate option. If you want to make a copy of the existing workflow, you can use the save as option. So these are the options. So on the left side, right, you have the list of action items, right, which you can use for the which you can use in creating a workflow. But in general, 99% of cases, when you go for a custom workflow site, the steps what we use is store procedure step is a mostly used step, okay, and the transfer step is the other one, and launch workflow step is the other one. So these are the main used, and email step sometimes we use it to send the notifications to the user. And if you want to execute any shell script, Linux commands, you go for the exe commands. Okay, so and user step to notify the user. So these are different steps you use, but rest all we don't use much when you go for the custom workflows. And I have also not used almost all, like all the steps. uh, Generally we use these steps mainly when you go for the customization. Okay, so I'll go to the steps which I know, rest all I'll ignore because I also not used all these workflows steps. uh, so store procedure steps, generally when you go for this step, right, so it will ask you for the procedure name and what are the parameters you want to pass to the particular step. Okay, so if you want to access any work any procedure which is in the app schema, you can do that. So always you have to prefix the procedure name with the app schema id, then you can happily access the procedure package which is in the app schema on the vcp side, on the AACP application instance, not on the EBS one. Okay, and you can add the parameters to the workflow. So there's a parameter window here. So using this, you can add a multiple parameters here. Okay, so only drawback here in the workflows is these parameters are not dynamic. Okay, so these are static parameters. Like once you save the definition, right, with the parameter list, so whenever you trigger the workflow will run for those predefined or already given values in the parameter list. So you cannot change dynamically. So if you want to change the parameters of the workflow, then you have to come to this workflow and you have to change it manually, then retrigger the workflow. Okay, it's not like a concurrent program where you can dynamically change it. So we'll create one dummy workflow after going through the steps. Okay. Then there's something called transfer step. So we'll talk about this in detail when we talk about the import and export functionality in Demantra. But for time being, this step mainly used to do two set of activities. One is when you are trying to import the data from the outside system through the import process. Okay, so when we loaded the data to the staging table, we loaded to the staying table set, TSS sales table, item and location table. Apart from that, if you want to load the other set of data for the existing combinations in Demantra through a CSV, that we can do through the import functionality. Okay, there's something called import integration functionality in Demantra. So when you use that functionality, the data comes to a different set of staging tables. From there, it loads to the base tables using the import functionality. Okay, and there's something called export functionality. So if you want to export any data which is there in Demantra from the sales data table, you can use the export functionality. So the main use of this transfer step is to import or export the data from Demantra to Demantra. Okay, two-way process. So there's the reason you have two options, import or export. So we'll talk about this later when we talk about the import profiles in detail. And the other important one is this launch workflow step. So if you are creating any custom workflow and if you want to trigger a child workflow within a master workflow, okay, so in that cases you can use this as a you can use this workflow step similarly, like it's like a request set, for example. So request set, generally what we do is we group a list of concurrent programs in a sequential order. So whenever you launch a request set, it triggers all the concurrent programs in a sequential order in the similar manner. So if you are creating any master workflow, so if you want to call all the child workflows in a sequential order, so you can add all those workflows using this particular step. Okay, so it gives all the workflow details here, what are the workflows configured in the system. And this is an email notification. So if you want to send the emails to the user once the completion of the workflow, you can use this particular step. Okay, for this we need that setup on the DB side. we have to enable that mail notification setup in the DB, then this works. So these are the few steps we generally use when you create any new workflows. I don't think any other steps are much important. We can ignore this. So let me try to create a simple workflow which gives a basic idea how it works. So for that, what I'll do is I'll just try to create a one simple procedure and database. So I'll try to refer a table just to show an example. So this is a seeded table, okay, DB exception log. So it stores all the log information. If something goes wrong in the workflow, this will store the specific set of details. So just for timing, what I'll try to do is I'll try to add a record to this table using a workflow trigger. So right now we have a maximum record with the date of today's date. Sorry, DB of yesterday's. That is 13th December. Right? So we'll try to create one record in this table with a custom procedure. Okay. Mm, with a custom step here. Uh, so this seeded procedure for this to insert a record to this particular table. Okay, there's something called debex. Okay, if I open this procedure, so generally it will talk about the three parameters: message, procedure, and procedure type. So message type. Okay, so when it's talking about the message type, so when you're trying to execute this particular procedure, so you should mention or you should tell the system to which staging table you want to insert the data. Okay, there are list of staging tables, predefined staging table to Demantra. So these are all the list of tables. So based on the parameter value you pass to it, okay, if you see here, by default it is passed E. Okay, E is nothing but DB exception log somewhere here. Okay, if I pass parameter as A, it will go to DB audit log. So based on the parameter you pass, the log message will capture in that particular table. Okay, so mostly these tables are these log tables are this one. DB exception log is the one. Okay, and DB call log is the one. So these are the mostly used uh, log files, log tables when you want to capture any custom errors. Most of the custom developments when we do, right, we try to capture the things in these particular tables. So just for timing, what I'll do is I'll just try to create a custom workflow with a simple procedure step to load the data to the DB exception log table. Okay. So just give the procedure name here and add the parameters now. The three parameters, right? So start. So if I want to write to exception log table, just give as a E option. Okay, save it. So now this step has this star icon. So it says that it's the starting step of the workflow. If I include the next step, right? So it will not get that icon. So it's the next step. Okay, so we have to link these two steps by clicking on this arrow mark. So from this next icon to this arrow, this is how we can link this different steps in a workflow. So for just for timing, I'll keep only one step. So when I validate it, so bottom you see this schema is valid. Just save this one. So whenever creating any workflow,